one of the real mistakes that salespeople make is the minute they find an opportunity, they want to dive in and start selling. Watch your mindset. It's much too easy to begin to blame circumstances. Yeah. What most salespeople don't understand is that the biggest competition they face is typically change and risk.
Buyers are not liars. They only lie to you because they don't trust you because of the selling techniques you're using on them. All right, so whatever you're doing right now, whether you're about to pick up the phone to call a potential customer, whether you're maybe driving down the road for a sales call with a prospect, or maybe you're walking into a boardroom meeting right now to finalize a deal or a contract. Heck, maybe you're doing that on Zoom right now with everything that's going on with the pandemic, or maybe you're just at the gym right now running on the treadmill, wondering how your day is going to be. I want you to stop and think about what I'm about to ask you. And I really want you to think about it on a deeper level. What does it actually take for you to be a top 1% salesperson in your industry? What does it actually take? Like, what skills do you have to learn? So the salesperson who makes all the money, the salesperson who gets any promotion they want. In fact, they turn down promotions they don't want. They have all the respect of ownership and management in their company. Well, my next guest is going to answer that question for you. And let me give you a small taste of this gentleman's background. He is an author, speaker, and very sought after business performance coach for executives and companies throughout the US and Canada. He's the founder of Business LockerRoom. I love that. Maybe you played sports in high school. We're going to get into that. And crushyournumber.com. I love that. Widely recognized as a powerful speaker and highly effective performance coach in the areas of sales management, leadership, and strategic planning. He's a former sales executive and a 2-time National Salesperson-of-the-Year, a serial entrepreneur, and a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. I love Forbes. He's written 2 books, One-on-One Management, What Every Great Manager Knows That You Don't, and Quit Whining and Start Selling. I love that. A step-by-step guide to a Hall of Fame career in sales. His 3rd book, Counter Mentor Leadership, How to Unlock the Potential of the 4-Generation Workplace, was co-written with his millennial son, Robby Riggs. We're going to have to ask about that. And he also says, no trophies were awarded in the writing of this book. However, it was selected as the 2019 gold medal winner in the leadership category for Axiom Business Book Awards. Very big achievement there. That's not easy to do. Please help me welcome to the show, Mr. Kelly Riggs. Kelly, how are you?
I'm fantastic. You know, it's interesting about the book. We have a lot of fun with it, my son and I. Yeah. But we actually shared the gold medal award with a Pulitzer Prize winning author. Really? So we're basically Pulitzer Prize winners. That's kind of the way we look.
I'm chalking it up. I'm going to put that in your bio next time. Hey, so I'm excited to have you here today, and here's why. So I love talking with sales professionals and sales leaders in the space and sales trainers that understand human behavior and how to use principles and techniques that work with human behavior rather than using old school sales techniques from the dinosaur ages of selling that work against human behavior. So I love how that applies to being a top sales professional. So let's do this. I want to dive right into your story.
Sure.
And give our listeners a feel for your background and how you arrived at this point in your life where you're known as one of the elite authorities on leadership, on sales, and persuasion. Maybe tell us a little bit more about your background and how you learned all these skills. Like, how did this happen?
Well, it took a while, as you might imagine. But, you know, it's interesting. I went to school to be an electrical engineer. Okay. My dad, because I had, a lot of math skills and in high school tested well. Okay. He's like, you need to go to engineering school. Took me 3 years to figure out that was a train wreck. Very bad plan. So I actually was playing ball. You mentioned that. I played D1 football. Well, to be honest and frank, I was on the team, and I've decided to quit all of that. Got out of engineering school.
So you didn't win the Heisman Trophy.
I was 3rd, but
you were close.
It's an achievement.
Okay.
Not at all. So I decided to quit it all. I actually decided to get out and get into business, get busy. Yeah. And got married. You can only imagine how my parents felt. They're like, you did what? Because my first job was a sales job.
Oh boy.
I started in sales in 1981, and I grew up with Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins and guys like that.
Yeah.
And more importantly, Miller Hyman's book, Conceptual Selling and Strategic Selling, were kind of the Bibles for me.
Right.
And so I got into sales, and I had a couple of jobs, and then I got into orthopedics, got into medical products, took off there. That's where I was a 2-time National Salesperson-of-the-Year. And from there, started my own company, wound up in 3 or 4 companies. And at the age of 45, had come out of a startup, had done well there as director of sales nationally, and was trying to figure out what to do. And a good friend of mine, a client who became my first client, was a principal in an accounting firm, called me up and said, "Hey, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm not sure yet, standard stuff, right?" And he goes, "While you're figuring it out, could you come over and help us with some personnel issues, some leadership issues?" He and I had known each other for a long time. And that's really how it got started. I tell you, Jeremy, the first thing I did was I said, I'm going to avoid every mistake I've made in my previous 3 companies. Instead of trying to figure it out on my own, I started looking for help. So I found a guy who actually roadmapped me into consultancy, helped me figure out how to take what I was doing. He said, you got to write a book. You got to become an expert. And from there, you began speaking, and eventually speaking all over the country and several.
Yeah, and I know you do a lot of speaking engagements. I want to talk to you that in a second. So I was watching you on a video earlier this morning, and you talk about how selling has changed since you started in the early 80s.
Yes.
In your thoughts, like how has selling changed since 1981, and what does that mean for a salesperson in our time?
Well, let's start with the obvious. Technology. When I started in the business, the only tool we had was the Yellow Pages. If you were lucky and your company bought Hoover's, you had access to Hoover's business profiles and that kind of thing.
Sure.
But back in the day, before, if you weren't a Zig Acolyte or a Tom Hopkins or somebody like that, it was throw enough opportunities up against the wall, see what sticks. It was all about shoe leather and pounding the pavement, making a lot of calls, those kinds of things. And you got taught a very direct way of selling, which I call product pushing now. You show up with a product, start talking features, say, hey, you need one of those. We have one of those. Here's my price, And obviously, you mentioned the neuroscience and behavior. We have so much more information about how we interact with human beings and the psychology of selling. It's really made a tremendous difference in the ability to be successful today.
You're right. Now, in our time, where we're at right now, you have to be what we call a problem finder and problem solver, not like you said, a product pusher, right? And typically when we go into companies and we train salespeople, we find that even very large companies, Fortune 500 companies, are mainly still teaching product pushing in some form. And it's quite interesting to see. But in our day and age, with the rise of the internet and the power of social media, you have to learn how to ask the right questions at the right time in the conversation to help your prospects find problems that they didn't even think they have. Because one thing we each have to understand, 90% of the people we talk to probably don't even know that they even have a problem, or maybe they know about a problem, but maybe it's really not that bad in their mind yet, or maybe they don't understand the consequences if they don't do anything about solving it now. And so your questioning ability, like you mentioned, determines if that person can help find problems in their mind from your questions they didn't realize that were that bad. And once they realize that they have those problems, then they become open to you and want to actually engage with you because there's urgency that they need to actually do something about that rather than pushing your product on them, right?
Yes, no question. Well, positioning against competitors is critically important, no question. But what most salespeople don't understand is that the biggest competition they face is typically change and risk. And they don't address those things when they're pushing product, right? So you're talking about product and your features and what it does. And if you're advanced, you're talking about what the product will do for them. If you're really advanced, you're talking about the problems that may be solved that you've discovered through that questioning process that you mentioned. But more importantly, you understand how difficult change actually is for a lot of people. How many times, Jeremy, you've been in sales for a while. How many times have you had somebody say to you, you know what, Jeremy, what you have is better than what we're using right now. But you know what? We're going to stay right here for now.
Yeah, they're going to stay in the status quo because they might think it's better, but they because of your questioning ability, you haven't helped them in their own mind persuade themselves that they really have to change now. They just push it off as like, oh, it's a problem, but it's not that bad of a problem, right? Because if you, like most salespeople, go in, they're taught how to, be consultative, whatever that means, ask a few questions like, oh, what keeps you awake at night, Mr. Prospect? Or what are 2 problems that you have? These are just surface level questions.
Right.
They're just the surface of what's really going on. And then they ask a few questions like that about their problems. And then they go into what? Like you said, their pitch. They talk about their features and benefits and how they have the best this and the best that, which every salesperson says they have the best. Absolutely. Like how many salespeople that have sold to you said, oh, our product is about 5th best in the market? No. Yeah. Everybody says they're the best. So when you say those things to a prospect, it typically triggers resistance because they've heard it so much from every salesperson trying to sell them anything. So this is going to be a great conversation. Now, what was the most significant thing you learned early in your sales career that really got you to the top of your field?
Well, 2 things I would say. The first one you've touched on a bunch, you've referenced, is the ability to ask questions. For years, if someone asked me what's the most important skill a great salesperson has to have, like everyone, I said, hey, you have to be a good listener. One day it dawned on me that wasn't right. You can be listening to the wrong information. It's really about the questions that you ask. And when you open up the ability to ask what we call strategic dialogue questions, which get people into a conversation about problems and so forth, that was a big deal. I would say number 2 was the ability to differentiate, because as you mentioned, and I talk about this a ton, is that everybody sounds exactly alike. And buyers get sort of inured against this idea of, oh yeah, you're the best and you've been around the longest and you've got this great client list. Don't care, hear it every day. Yeah. When you have the ability to come in and actually reposition as something completely unique, what you do, Jeremy, is you gain shelf space in their mind. Anybody that's going to the grocery store to buy cereal looks and goes, what in the world? I mean, how do I make a choice?
There's 100 boxes.
Cereal company, you want eyesight level, you want the end caps. That's what I want as a salesperson. I want them to put me on the end cap and think of me differently so I can avoid that commodity trap. Yeah. Learning those 2 things really
become, made it. And I love that. You hit it. I mean, it's such a perfect response there. You become in their mind what they consider a trusted authority, whereas most salespeople they look at as just another salesperson trying to sell them something. So those salespeople get pushed off to the side, like you said, like the cereal aisle, and they become commoditized, meaning that they're always competing on price.
Yeah, and let me build on that a little bit.
Never competes on price. They don't.
Yeah, let me build on that, because the 2 things are connected. When you're trying to be unique and demonstrate expertise as a trusted advisor, the quickest way to do that is to ask questions that reveal that you know a whole lot about what you're doing and about the problems that they face. So instead of saying, what do you use now? And, those kind of things, you're asking deeper, insightful questions. And the first neural response is, wow, this individual can help me.
Yeah. They're an authority figure, right? And when they give you, let's say you ask a question, they give you a surface answer. It's really, like you said, it's not just listening. It's listening to what they mean, not just what they're saying. Absolutely. There's a big difference in that. So you pick up on cues of what they're saying, and then you have to learn what we call NEPQ probing, or like expanded probing or clarifying questions that help them uncover more of that problem or the root cause of that problem to you, but more importantly themselves. They're hearing themselves talk about how that problem happened, like the root cause, and then more importantly, how that problem is affecting them. And Absolutely. That's where the emotion comes out. And like, people buy 100% emotion. They don't buy on logic. They just justify. I mean, brain studies prove that now.
Absolutely.
People used to say that 30 years ago. Now brain studies show that 100% for sure.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about how you became the National Salesperson of the Year twice. Besides questioning skills, what did you really have to learn? Because obviously questioning skills are the most important. What else did you have to learn to really get to that level, to win that? That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And it's, that's the $1 million question. It really is. I mean, there's so many things that you have to learn to do, but there's some foundational things that if you don't do, you literally have no chance. My orthopedic company that I went to work for turned out to be a great company, but the training, Jeremy, it was extensive. It went something like this: good luck.
Right.
I mean, they handed me samples and brochures and kind of gave me a little product description.
Product pushing.
Yeah, I'm product pusher. So they're in the West Coast. I'm in Oklahoma. And they said, go out there in the middle of part of the country with no support and no training and no real sales management oversight and go be successful, right? And we wonder why we have such turnover in sales.
Sure.
And what I found was that the secret to being successful at that level really required me to become the expert in what I do. And so that when I achieved the Salesman of the Year the first year, they asked me to speak at the national sales meeting, and nobody knew who I was.
Yeah.
And so here's this nobody from Oklahoma who's now speaking as the national sales manager or a national Salesman of the Year. And I get up and start talking about all of these things that I'm doing and things that I've learned. And they're like, where did you learn this stuff? And I said, well, the thing about it is I'm going to talk to an individual who makes $500,000 a year. I better speak their language. I better understand their work. I need to understand kinesiology, physiology, anatomy, surgical procedures, all the language. And I could speak in their language, and that just blew people away. And I think you have to become an expert, number one, in your products. I think you have to become an expert in your industry, because that's what leads you to the expertise that we talked about
You have
earlier.
to become an expert in helping that person through your questioning see the problems they have, like you said, and the results that you can actually bring them once they change that situation with what you offer. So many people say, and it's cliche, it's been around for 100 some years, people buy from people they like. Okay, sure. I'm going to tell you, in 2020, people buy from people who they feel can get them the best result and solve their problems far more than people they like. You might like grandma, but grandma might be selling the latest network marketing vitamin pills or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily mean you love grandma, but you're not going to buy from grandma. You love her, right? You love your friend who's doing that, but you might not buy from them. People have changed. People are far more cautious, far more skeptical. They don't just buy because they like you, you're their buddy. They buy based on the result that you can bring them of what they're looking for. Things have definitely shifted in the market for sure. And it's been going on for a long time. I think people
has. There's a much greater sophistication and complexity of buyers today, where they're completely unwilling to mess with amateurs, for the most part. They're looking for somebody, and they can see them coming a mile away, the way they present themselves, the way they ask questions. I mean, the typical old-time sales stereotype and stigma. If you're in that game, you're done, and you don't even realize it.
You are so done, especially if you're in a complex selling environment. You're done.
That's correct. I mean, your objective is to build trust, and trust comes from that expertise, and expertise comes from being an expert, and you demonstrate that by the quality of the questioning and the conversation that you have. The sad thing, Jeremy, is we have a systemic issue in the corporate workplace. Number one, we train salespeople to be product pushers. That's the way we train them. And number two, when you don't understand the neuroscience and the psychology of personal interactions, we're actually training people to be the salespeople that buyers don't like.
Yeah, we're training them techniques that work against human behavior.
100% right.
So when we say certain things or we ask certain questions, it triggers the wall, the resistance to come up that we've created. Buyers are not liars. They only lie to you because they don't trust you because of the selling techniques you're using on them, right? They feel manipulated. Buyers today do not want to be talked at and sold to. They want to be asked and understood. It's a major shift. Now, let's jump into this. What's your perspective on, we've talked a little bit about this, but what's your perspective on sales training today in the market besides the product pushing? What are you seeing out there?
Well, I'm going to be bold and brash and arrogant and everything else. It sucks. It blows. It doesn't work. Now, is that an indictment against people like yourself or me or others? Absolutely not.
Sure.
The system is broken. We don't teach and train anyone anything of importance the way we train salespeople. We just don't do it. Now, the evidence is clear. You go to Dave Curlin's group, Objective Management Group. They've surveyed over 1 million salespeople. He will tell you that 7% of salespeople are considered elite. Another 16 or 17% are doing pretty well. 3 out of 4 are failing. His words, not mine. The bottom 25% are hopeless. And it's because they don't have the right stuff. We don't train them effectively. We bring them in and teach them a product. We absolutely handicap people in the way we sell. So they hire a guy like you, Jeremy, and you're a guy that says, all right, look, if you want to train salespeople, you got to change behaviors. You got to give them fundamental knowledge about human psychology and all these things. This takes time. They go, well, that's adorable, Jeremy. Here's what we got. We got a 4-hour seminar once a year. We'd love for you to do it. and you go in and you blow it away, and their retention rate is less than 5%, and they have no sales managers helping them practice or
to implement. It's horrible.
It's ridiculous.
And here you said something, roughly 3 out of every 4 salespeople
are
low performers, but yet we have thousands of books. We have thousands of courses on selling over the last decades. Why are so many salespeople struggling?
Well, that's a good question as well. My opinion, and it is just an opinion, but I think that the vast majority of people lack the drive, the initiative, the urgency to actually seek out those kinds of training and to spend money, not just on books, but on coaching, outside training. Again, I told you I grew up with Ziegler and Hopkins and conceptual selling. Yeah. I invested in those things, not just the books, but in the training, the seminars. And I was consistently trying to improve who I was, not only as a salesperson, but as a person, period. And it's getting harder and harder to find those people. They're waiting on the company to do it for them. 9 out of 10 times, the company's going to do it wrong. So it's a problem.
Let me give you an example of this. So I have a couple of friends that own very successful companies, large corporations. And when their HR people and sales management interview salespeople, the number one question they ask and they look for is they say, how much money did you spend last year in your previous sales job on sales training? Not what the company bought for you, but how much money did you spend yourself on sales training?
Right.
And if they get a low number or anything, they will never hire that person because they know that that person is not willing to invest in learning the right skills to be successful. They're waiting around for the company to do it. Whatever the company gives to them, they're just like, oh, it must be good. And so they use it. They don't invest in themselves, so they'll never hire those people. If somebody comes back and says, I spent $7,000 last year on this seminar and I went through this coaching program with this company and I learned from this, that's the person they're looking for. Maybe they might not think they're the right skills, but at least that person's invested in themselves and they want to improve and be a top salesperson. That's who they hire.
Absolutely right. I mean, the neuroscience supports it again. Angela Duckworth wrote a phenomenal book called Grit, and it talks about drive and discipline, or passion and perseverance, as being the 2 drivers of success. And they say that grit correlates to sales success, according to her research, more than anything out there. That's the willingness to invest, to grow, to learn, develop. I won't hire a salesperson or facilitate a hiring if I don't find those the characteristics as well.
We only hire salespeople in our company who are certified in our training, that have gone through it and crushed it with what they sold. 100%, because they're already trained, right?
Absolutely.
I love that concept. Now let's shift here, because we kind of went over a shift of like, salespeople. We have shirts now that we put #train to retain, right? So our salespeople, you're training to retain information. You're continually training. One of my mentors in my life early on taught me that is training something that you did, or is training something that you do. Right. If you want to be a top professional, because you're going to work the same hours every week, why not sell 3 times as much as you are in those hours? I want to score as many points as possible or get as many rebounds. So I have to train and continually train to develop those skills and basically have more skills than my competitors. The same thing is in sales. If you're not training daily, if you're not learning new skills, if you're driving down the road and you're listening to your favorite news channel or your radio songs, and you're not like learning, like making your car a university on wheels, like Brian Tracy would say, then you're never going to be at that level financially that you want to. You just won't. Now, let's talk about this. This is very important. What's one of the most important questions that every salesperson should be asking their prospect? And your thoughts, like what's a very important question in any part of the process, the sales process, that a salesperson should use with that prospect?
Well, I'm probably going to use a couple that I've found to be very successful. One is pretty obvious. When you're talking about the problem, you've discovered the problem. Yeah. One of the real mistakes that salespeople make is the minute they find an opportunity, they want to dive in and start selling. So right? Here come a product now, right? It's better.
Oh, we got it. Oh, you got that problem. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah.
You have a problem? Boy, have you met the right guy, right? So the question often becomes, what is it costing you right now not to solve that problem? What is it costing you personally? What is it costing your business in terms of that problem sitting there? And I know you don't have time, Mr. Prospect. Nobody has enough time because you're too busy running a business and doing everything else. But the inability to invest in time and making a change, what's it costing you? I think the other question from a very general sense is when I get into a conversation, I'll often ask, listen, if you could draw it up the way you want to draw it up, you could be doing exactly what you want to be doing right now. What would that look like, and how would it change your current reality?
Yeah, so you're getting them to envision their future state
Absolutely.
once their problems are
Absolutely.
solved, right? So I love that. The first question is getting them to really focus on maybe something they haven't really thought about, like, you know, how much is this costing you? This problem that you're having, if you really thought about it, how much do you think this is costing you on an annual basis? I like to throw that word in there, if you really thought about it. Because when you say that, a lot of times people are like, you know, like, or you ask that first question, they'll be like, well, I haven't really thought about it. Well, if you really thought about it, what do you think it would be? And they're like, oh, it'd be this. And you're like, what? How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, you can lead them there too, right? Yeah. If they're saying, yeah, this is killing me, it's taking up an hour or a week or a day or something, you start doing the math times what it costs them to be focused on that. And, you know, the nice thing about this is not only does it uncover the inner workings of your prospect's mind and what's going on, but when it comes time to negotiate price, you've actually put a lot of value on the table, because you're able to negotiate those savings and that implication of change against, well, your process, you know, your price is too high. And
it's the gap. It's the gap that we're talking about. So here's the price of your service or product. Here's their objectives of where they want to be. Look how big that gap is, right? If the gap is small because you haven't learned the right questions to ask, that price might look more than their objectives. So you have to learn the right questions to get that gap so big in their mind, not your mind, their mind, that let's say if it's a $100,000 investment to gain them an extra $10 million a year, well, that's pretty cheap. That's pretty low.
Absolutely.
It's all how you can create the gap. 100%. I love that. Now, besides questioning, your questioning ability, what do you think is the most important skill a salesperson needs to learn, like right now? We're in this pandemic. What's the most important skill they need to learn right now?
I don't know if it's a skill or an innate trait or a characteristic. I do think there's parts of it that you can learn because of preparation. But I think that you need to be able to think on your feet. So many times prospects are going to come at you with things you may not have anticipated. And if you're trying to make it up on the spot, Jeremy, you know, that's a bad plan. Yeah. I've always been a practitioner of role playing in my mind, where this presentation or this call or this interview can go. What kinds of questions might they ask? How might it go off the rails? You know, what kinds of objections might they have that I haven't anticipated? And they say, well, if you haven't anticipated it, then how would you know? Well, that's the point. I'm really trying to anticipate it. And so if I do get into a scenario where I don't know, salespeople, if you're listening right now, don't wing it, don't fake it. You'll actually add to your credibility if you'll simply say these words. You know, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to it, but you give me an hour to do some homework, I'll have an answer. And then you get back to them in an hour, you're already demonstrating the responsiveness they're looking for in salespeople. I think it's issue.
The trust there, right? Because if you just waffle and then they later find out it wasn't the right way, even if you didn't purposely lie, they're going to feel like you did, right? And so when the trust is gone, there's no sale. There's just in our day and age, if there's no trust, there's no sale. It's just just different, you know. I love that. Now, what do you think the reason? And let's talk a little bit more about where we're at right now with everything going on, the pandemic and all that stuff. And I know other areas of the world and country are better or worse from where they're at. But what is the reason why so many buying decisions are stalling in the marketplace right now? From like a buyer's perspective, why are they? Because I hear this all the time with people that email us like, hey, I need help with this or whatever. Do you have something that will help me? Because buyers are just not making decisions. What do you think that reason is? Why are so many buyers just stalling their decisions right now in the market?
Well, I think that the answer for me is fairly apparent. I mean, there's a certain uncertainty that exists, which represents for a buyer risk that they're not willing to take, because they don't know if they'll get the return on the investment, right? So it's easy for buyers to sit on the sidelines now because they can't be criticized. Unfortunately, that's what salespeople are doing too. They're like, you know what, pandemic, COVID, you know, people aren't buying now. It may be harder to find buyers that are proactive and willing to take risk, but let me guarantee you they are out there, and they're far more than you think they are. So average salespeople use an economic downturn or something like COVID to sit on the sidelines. 1%ers use COVID or economic downturns to clean house. I mean, they go in and just clean up.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head, because it's easy to sell. It's easy to get lazy in selling in times of like economic expansion, where it's just
absolutely
easier to sell, like the last 4 or 5 years, right? But like you said, but in times of like economic contraction that we're experiencing now, that we might not have really experienced 100% yet, like it's still going possibly, right? But in times of economic contraction, every shortcoming you, the salesperson, have, if you're the business owner, every shortcoming your salespeople have will only be magnified.
Yes.
Okay. It will only get worse and will result for lost sales for your salespeople and your company. So once you learn the right skills, it becomes easy. Now, let's ask you this. What are a few questions, or even what's one question that a salesperson can ask, in our time right now with people hesitating, to help build urgency in the sale to prevent that from happening in their mind?
Well, I go back to the original conversation we had about what's it costing you not to solve the problem. More importantly, when you position yourself against your competition, our prospects have competition. They're trying to find ways to thrive as well. Yeah. What is it that you're not doing now that your competition may be that would give them a head start when we come out of these kinds of things? Yeah. I need to put them into a future state and have them think about it. I need to get them, as you said, if you really thought about it, yeah, what is sitting on the sidelines doing for you? Yeah, it may be helping you manage a little bit of risk, but are your competitors doing the exact same thing? Are there things you can do today that would allow you to hop over a couple of competitors and properly position you? I give you an example. I work with a lot of engineering and construction companies and architects. Yeah. And, with building kind of contracting and everybody's putting projects on hold. Yeah. People are saying, well, what do we do? I say, well, you become a resource for COVID, and you go out there and begin to talk to them about how working with you can improve their opportunities, and how you can do things to help inform and educate their workplace and the people that are out on projects and all those kinds of things. Because here's what's going to happen. When they come back, when they finally regain their confidence, who are they going to remember? The people that never contacted them, or the people that were there
on the sidelines? Yeah, because business owners are thinking, instead of like 2 or 3 years down the road strategic planning, right, they're thinking 90-day planning. There's so much uncertainty right now with everything that's going on. So you have to be even sharper with your skills. Like, you have to learn what are called consequence questions that get them to question their way of thinking, that what will happen if they don't do anything. Like, John, have you thought about the possible ramifications if you don't do anything about solving this in the next few months? Or what are you going to do if nothing changes and you keep getting the same issues with this vendor you're using for the next 2 or 3 months? So you get them to think, what are the consequences if you don't do anything? And that widens that gap from your price to their objectives, where they're like, well, that gap is so big in their mind that they have to do something now. You're so right.
No doubt about it. And what I've found is a really nice technique is that, if you've got the expertise and you've been in the business a while, you can say, I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I've seen a lot of these circumstances come and go. And one of the things that I've seen is some companies do X and some companies do Y, and those companies that do X as opposed to Y thrive during these times. Let me give you an example. And then I tell them a real story about a real company that I've worked with in the past. And immediately the prospect is able to project themselves into that scenario, which obviously I've carefully chosen because it's very similar to what they're doing. And that causes them to step back, Jeremy, and go, that sounds a lot like us, and I haven't really thought about it that way. Then I can move ahead. Remember, people are going to make decisions emotionally. The only way to touch the emotional part of the brain is to tell stories and to get people involved in those.
Now you're helping them find problems that maybe they didn't think they had.
100%.
You become a problem finder. So now you become even more important in their mind, because wait a minute, besides this one problem I thought I had a little bit, now there's 4 or 5 other problems, and we need to have Kelly solve these for us. Otherwise we're hosed, right? So one last question I was going to ask you. If you were going to change the trajectory of a company, where would you actually start?
Sales manager.
Why? Because
without someone to coach and develop and continue that training, who knows what they're doing, who is effective in that process. I mean, look, the greatest athletes in the world have coaches. You got to ask yourself why that is.
Why is that?
Right? You can learn the skills, but it's too easy to move off the path. It's too easy to develop a bad habit. It's too easy to lose your mindset, to take a couple of hits and then begin to doubt who you are and what you're capable of. You need a great sales manager who can help you develop a clear plan that will take you to your objectives, who can help you learn those new skills, who can help you in role play, refine your abilities. I mean, to me, the most important position in a company outside of the founder and the visionary is the sales manager. And that person may be the same person sometimes, but I'd start there, no doubt.
100% of the time. I agree with you 100% on that. This was great. Do you have any final thoughts or advice for our listeners?
Well, I think in the age of COVID and pandemic, my final advice is watch your mindset. It's much too easy to begin to blame circumstances. And the really great ones out there are simply playing this like a game. We're in a competition. We're on a field where people are pushing back. And the game is going to be won by those who not only have a great strategy, but are willing to execute and implement on a daily basis. You just cannot give up.
100%. Now, where can our listeners learn more about you and your training? How can they get involved?
Well, BizLockerRoom.com is where you'll find everything that I do. I obviously work in the world of sales, but I also do a ton of strategic planning for companies, and I work with leadership teams. And a lot of times those three things all form a nice Venn diagram for a client, right? You can also go, as you mentioned, to crushyournumber.com. That's where we do sales training online and have a phenomenal program there that involves live coaching and all those kinds of things. That's the two places you can find.
So go to crushyoursales.com. Is there
Crush Your Number.
Crushyournumber.com.
Mm-hmm.
Crushyournumber.com. Is there a place they can opt in, or where would they go once they get there?
Yeah, when you go there, there's opportunities to opt in, to watch introductory videos and see if we're the right flavor for you. You know, you look for a good fit when you're looking for a coach or a trainer or something like that. BizLockerRoom the same way.
BizLockerRoom.com?
BizLockerRoom.com. Listen, something for your listeners.
We'll post the site here on here.
Okay, post the site. Something for your listeners. Go to, we have a shortened hashtag or a shortened URL, blkr.co/free15. Okay. You don't have to opt in for anything. It's just 15 questions you need to be asking about your sales team. You're welcome to go get that and download it. If you're a sales manager or business owner, just 15 great questions to ask about the way you're operating your sales team.
I love that. All right, Kelly, it's a pleasure having you on. I'm going to have you on the show again. That was a great conversation. I know that helped a ton of people today.
Appreciate that.
Now, if you're serious about joining the top 1%, I mean the top 1%, and you want to experience more training content just like this, click the links right over there. Right over there, they're exactly what you need to see next. You see, I release new episodes featuring top salespeople and sales authorities, multiple six-figure, high six-figure, even seven-figure earners every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday every single week at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you're new here, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right below, and join our new Facebook group, Sales Revolution. You see, it's free, and there's a link in the description below just for you. We put it there for you. Finally, I make posts on Facebook and Instagram each and every day with more tips and training, so be sure and follow me and turn on your notifications. So make a comment in the first 7 minutes to any of my latest posts, share this episode, and there's a very real chance that you're going to win some killer prizes. And here's the thing. Don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be like everyone else. Get into the game. Join the sales revolution. Stay active. Get involved. Learn the right skills, and we will show you how to take your life and income to a level that most only dream about. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.